Hi, my name is Olivia, and today's video is my June 2019 book haul. I've accumulated a total of 8 books, including both physical copies and Kindle editions, so let's get started. The first book is Scythe by Neil Shusterman, which is set in a world where war, famine, illness, and even death have been completely eradicated. The removal of these constraints caused some obvious problems, the most notable of which is the unchecked population growth. In order to prevent the population size from continuing to expand exponentially, scythes have been appointed to end the lives of various individuals within the society. The plot follows Citra and Rowan, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly, as they train to become scythes within this world. This book is actually going to be my first exposure to Neil Shusterman's writing. I've heard about his books for the past several years, but never actually picked one up before. I decided to start with this one because I'm very intrigued by the world building, and I think it sets up the book well for a very entertaining plot. I tend to prefer more plot-driven works than character-driven, so I'm hoping that this one will be right up my alley. Also, from what I can tell, it seems like this book abandons many of the dystopian tropes that I've grown to hate over the years. The next book that I picked up is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. The premise of this book centers around the death of one of its main characters, Evelyn Hardcastle, which is set against the backdrop of an extravagant party. Narration is provided by one of the individuals in attendance, who goes by the name of Aiden. Throughout the book, he is forced to relive the day of Evelyn's death over and over again, and the only way to break this cycle is to correctly identify her killer. There's an added twist in that every day, Aiden wakes up in the body of a different individual and gets to witness unfolding events from that individual's perspective. I've already had a chance to read this one, and I actually flip-flopped back and forth between the physical copy and the audiobook, which I would very highly recommend. The narration in it is excellent. Before going into this one, I was initially very skeptical about the young adult mystery aspects of it. In the past, I haven't had a particularly good track record with mysteries geared toward children and young adults, so I was a little bit worried headed into this one and concerned that it wouldn't live up to all of the hype. But I was pleasantly surprised by how the mystery aspects of this book were handled and the ongoing suspense that was kept up for the entire duration of the plot. Most importantly, there were no blaringly obvious clues being dropped every 10 pages or so, which has been something that I've had an issue with in the past. I will say that this book is very confusing, especially initially, but I think it's done intentionally so, and it's done well. It really contributes to the air of suspense and drew me in as a reader, so it was actually something that I enjoyed. The next book that I purchased is Bridge of Clay by Marcus Zusak, who is also the author of The Book Thief. To be honest, I don't know much about the plot of this book, but I'm trying to keep it that way before I get started reading it. From what I do know, Bridge of Clay follows the 5 Dunbar brothers as they grow up without their parents. Their mother died early on, and their father disappeared during their early childhood. One of these brothers, Clay, is the focal point of the novel, and he spends much of this book helping to construct a bridge. I've been meaning to reread The Book Thief for years now. It's been easily 6 or 7 years since the last time that I read it, and I think this is going to give me the perfect excuse to do so. The Book Thief was where I fell in love with Zusak's writing style and his ability to completely immerse you in his world building and storyline. I also think he's incredibly talented at crafting multi-dimensional characters who have their fair share of flaws, making them all the more realistic. Up next is American Gods by Neil Gaiman, which is an adult standalone fantasy that focuses on mythology. The novel is narrated by Shadow, whose wife passes away mere days before his release from his prison sentence. After his release, he encounters an individual on his journey home who claims to be a former god, and this sets him off on a road trip adventure across the country. Neil Gaiman is yet another author whose books I haven't picked up to date, so I'm really looking forward to using this as an introduction to his writing. I'm intrigued by the mixture of American culture and history with mythology. I'm also the first person to admit that I haven't read anything with a mythology focus in a very long time, but I'm also looking forward to diving back into that type of book. Next up are the first 3 books in the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson, which are The Final Empire, The Well of Ascension, and The Hero of Ages. This is an adult epic fantasy series that's set in a world that's in shambles, following hundreds of years of rule at the hand of an immortal tyrant. The individuals belonging to the lowest class in society are enslaved and homeless, which is a sharp contrast to the nobility, who are gifted with allomancy, the ability to use magic upon consuming metals. Two of the main protagonists within this series team up in an attempt to overthrow the current ruler. This book haul is starting to take on a certain type of theme. This is yet another author whose works I've never read, despite having heard raving reviews. It's been a long time since I've started an adult fantasy series, and even though I'm a little bit intimidated by the size of these books, I'm really looking forward to immersing myself in the world. I've heard that the world building, characters, and magic system are all phenomenal, which makes me even more excited to start this series. The final physical book that I picked up is Wolf Hunter River by Rachel Kane. This is the third and final installment in the Stillhouse Lake series. The first book in the trilogy, Stillhouse Lake, is a psychological thriller that centers around Gina Royal discovering that her husband is a serial killer. And no, that's not a spoiler, it's revealed within the first 10 pages of the book. From there, she's forced to move around the country, constantly changing her own name and identity, as well as those of her children, in order to protect themselves from the unrelenting public, who have deemed her also responsible for the crimes. I don't want to give anything else away, just because I think it's better to go into that book with little to no expectations or knowledge about what's to happen. When I first started this series, I read the first 2 books back to back within the span of about 5 days. This last installment was only recently published, I believe in April of this year, and I've been dying to get my hands on it. Now that my semester at college has come to a close, I'm so excited to dive back into this world and see how the story wraps up. Next up is another adult psychological thriller, A Pleasure and a Calling by Phil Hogan. This novel follows William Hemming, a real estate agent with a few dark secrets. Most notably, he copies keys for all of the houses that he's ever sold, and he holds on to those for long after the properties have been purchased. He uses these keys to repeatedly enter these houses and rifle through the belongings of their inhabitants, uncovering their secrets and private lives along the way. Personally, I find this premise downright chilling, which is one of the reasons that I was immediately drawn to this book. It's highly original and not overdone, and I have a feeling it's going to be one of those books that keeps me up at night. The final book for this haul is Sleeping Beauties by Stephen and Owen King. This book takes place in a world plagued by sleeping disease, which affects only women and causes them to be enveloped in a cocoon-like substance as soon as they fall asleep. This slumber is permanent, and if disturbed, these women tend to kill the person responsible before returning to sleep. This novel focuses on the spread of this affliction, its aftermath, as well as the story of one woman who's completely immune to the disease. To date, I've not read anything by Owen King, but I have read a few of Stephen King's books in the past and really enjoyed those. I'm looking forward to seeing how their writing styles blend and come together in this book. This is something that's really bothered me with co-authored books in the past, and it's always been most obvious when each author has a very different writing style and narration style. Regardless, I'm trying to put those thoughts aside and go into this book with an open mind. I'm hoping to fall in love with this one and get a few scares along the way, as I have with the other Stephen King books that I've read so far. And that wraps up my June 2019 book haul. If you enjoyed it, please feel free to click the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video.